The latest we're tracking from Ukraine. Days after the Crimea bridge blast, several blasts today rocked Kyiv. In fact, Russia, remember, has launched a massive wave of strikes targeting cities across Ukraine in retaliation for the attack that took place on the bridge linking Russia and Crimea. And to talk about it in detail, joining us on this broadcast is a very special guest. We have an MP from Ukraine, Sophia, who's joining us on this broadcast. Sophia, thank you for taking out your time and speaking to us here on Times Now. Now, barely hours after the Russian president denounced the bridge attack as an act of terrorism, we've seen these kind of blasts take place in Ukraine. Kyiv has been very peaceful the last couple of months. What can you tell us about what really happened there in the latest?
This morning, we had an attack of 75 rockets launched from different directions by the Russian Federation and by the order of Putin. 41 of the rockets were caught by our anti-aircraft system. The rest of the rockets, unfortunately, were exploded in the cities of Ukraine. In Kyiv, we have more than 10 different explosions. Unfortunately, already in Kyiv, 8 people reported murdered and more than 20 people have been wounded. In my native city of Lviv, 70 kilometers from Polish border, we had approximately 10 explosions. We hope that at least 2 rockets were caught by anti-aircraft system, but unfortunately, these rocket attacks are all over Ukraine. When we were agreeing on my life at this moment, we've gotten information that 47 more rockets were launched from Astrakhan on the territory of Moscow Federation onto Ukraine. And unfortunately, we are expecting these rockets to reach Ukraine in a few next minutes. There is a question. I do not think that this is only the reaction on the explosion on the Crimean bridge. And we do not know exactly what happened there. And we do not know whether these were Ukrainian services or this was some kind of provocations by Moscow side. But I would like to remind that Crimea itself, it is the territory of Ukraine that has been drastically occupied and annexed by Moscow Federation. I would like to remind that almost 8 months ago, Moscow Federation invaded Ukrainian territory and started the full-scale aggression. And this is the question. When a country is just trying to erase another country because that was the decision of the dictator, whether the country has a right to exist. We know today the Russian Federation to be a terrorist country that should not only be punished, but it has no right for existence in the civilized world.
Right, but Sophia, this is also coming at a time after the annexation of 4 of the provinces there of Ukraine by Russia. But the Russian president had called the blowing up of the bridge as an act of terrorism and had squarely blamed the Ukraine secret services.
This is the hybrid approach that Ukraine experiences from the Moscow Federation for the last 8 years. The terrorist country that is killing for 8 years in a row Ukrainian people and occupying Ukrainian territory is trying to name Ukrainians to be a terrorist just because we protect our lives. Just like a short example, today a rocket was launched on the children kindergarten in Kyiv. Is that a terrorist place? Whether the children are the terrorists? They were trying to reach today the monument of Saint Volodymyr, who baptized Ukraine many years ago. It was a response to the act of terrorism. How the Saint Volodymyr monument influences the future of Moscow Federation. The aggressor is trying to blame a victim. And unfortunately, still many countries of the world think that the victim is also guilty that she or he provoked the aggressor. Ukraine has never provoked the Moscow Federation. We were the country that did not want to join any political or military bloc before the Moscow aggression. But we need to find a possibility to survive. And I do not understand those countries and people who still support Putin and Moscow Federation trying to find out some ways for the negotiations. You cannot negotiate or find a peace with the people of the country that just wants to kill you, regardless of any reasons.
Okay, fair enough. Sophia, now, this bridge is often seen as an imposing symbol of Moscow's annexation of the peninsula, of the Crimean Peninsula. And in that sense, what would you say to these kind of charges being made by President Putin now? Because this, remember, was also a key supply route for Moscow's forces in southern Ukraine.
Yes, this bridge is very important for the Moscow Federation to supply the military stuff to kill more Ukrainians, to impose a war on Ukrainian territory. But the small example, today one of the rockets almost reached the glass bridge in Kyiv, the pedestrian bridge in Kyiv. The rocket that exploded, and you can find a video, but the glass bridge survived. But the Moscow-Crimean bridge, because of some reason, was ruined. So this is a question for Moscow Federation constructors, with what and with which materials they were constructing the bridge that was ruined by some fuel explosion. And this, I think this is an agony of Putin. This is symbolical that that bridge was ruined almost on Putin's birthday. But the question is, we are trying to find some symbolical places or some symbolical reason. The only symbol is that this is a terrorist country, and it should be finally punished for the first time in 80 years.
Sophia, please do stay on with us. We're just going to play out those videos full frame for a better understanding for our viewers who are joining in right now. What has been transpiring for the last several months there, and there has been an escalation with the last attack on Kyiv that happened in June and more attacks, explosions that have been reported today. Take a look.
Those are some of the visuals, Sophia. Now, Ukraine is claiming that Russia has launched as many as 75 missiles, and we've seen the impact on ground. What would you say essentially? Do you think that Russia can take cover fire behind the narrative that this was provocation from the Ukrainian side?
The greatest provocation for Russia is that Ukraine exists. So I think we do not have to react on these statements of provocation or not provocation. I think that Ukraine has to combine and join all the efforts itself and the efforts of the civilized country to strengthen Ukrainian anti-aircraft system, but also to say what the next step should be done to stop the Moscow Federation. Unfortunately, as the military say, the Moscow Federation does not feel the pain of what is going on in Ukraine. Now they lost already more than 250,000 soldiers in Ukraine. And what should be the response from the Moscow Federation to stop everything?
But Sophia, unlike previous such attacks that have taken place, mostly have hit Kyiv's outskirts. This has happened right in the center. Of course, we could hear in those visuals how sirens have been blaring, and they have targeted very central locations in the very heart of the city this time around.
Yes, unfortunately, this time it's the very heart of the city, and one of the first rockets targeted and exploded in the building of the former Ukrainian parliament at the beginning of the 20th century, and also the university area. these photos and videos are already spread out all over the world, so I'm not given the coordinates for Moscow Federation Army. But the question is, I think that together with trying to undermine the infrastructure of Ukraine, they are also trying to undermine the official institutions, and they are trying to put on a question of whether Ukraine has as a legitimate and official powers to go on with this fight and to protect the country.
All right, Sophia, what about the action going forward here, and what is the country's plan now? Because there is, of course, fear now with this kind of an explosion that has been reported in several places across Ukraine, that the situation goes back to what we saw, let's say 2 months ago, wherein multiple explosions could be witnessed day in and out. Do you fear that kind of a situation taking place again, and what's your plan going forward?
I think the plan should have the military people, and our commander-in-chief already made a statement that they're getting ready for the response and for the protection of the country. But I think there should be several next steps. We, on the political arena, we have to raise a question for the further sanctions against Moscow Federation and for the final recognition of the Russian Federation as a terrorist country, as we do have this with Iran and with North Korea and with some other countries. The next point, unfortunately, the part of the explosions were caused by the Iranian drones, Shahed. There, Iran says that they have not given some drones to the Moscow Federation. We already caught several of them, and some of them made big relations in Ukraine as well, not far from Kyiv. I think that we should raise a question how these drones were constructed, whether from which countries they have taken the details, and to stop this cooperation as well. And the third point, on the political level, we should exclude the Moscow Federation from the United Nations and from the Security Council, and to find out how to block all the financial flows that Moscow Federation still has. Unfortunately, the OPEC recently lowered the oil digging up, and that was in the interest of the Moscow Federation. And unfortunately, Moscow has now more money to fight against Ukraine.
Does it also mean a real push for Ukraine to be a part of NATO alliance? We'll be also getting a reaction shortly coming in from President Zelensky himself. In the meantime, Sophia, thank you very much for joining in. Sophia Vedana, who is a Ukrainian MP with us, are talking about the latest explosions that have hit the capital Kyiv in Ukraine.